Well, hello, neighbors. Welcome to our new visits. How are you doing? So good to be back with you again after quite a while away. You have to forgive me, I'm just winding up our mantle clock here. You ever seen a mantle clock before? This is one of my favorites. As soon as I get it wound up here, I'll show it to you. When you wind up the clock, that's what makes this particular one run. There we go. Yeah. There's the clock. You want to look at that? See this clock right here? It has what's called a pendulum. It ticks back and forth, ticking off the seconds. And if we go back, hear it? Up here, these hands are what tell you what time it is by using the numbers that go around the clock. Isn't that interesting? Now, another thing that's interesting about this particular clock is that when it's wound up and the hands are in the right position, it'll chime and it'll tell you what time it is. So if I set this clock for the exact time, see, it chimed 7 times. So that means it's 7 o'clock. Now, this clock also, if we bring it to the halfway point, it'll chime 1 time, telling us that it's on the half hour. So I'll finish getting this clock here set proper. There we go. There. Now, our clock is set, and it can tell time for us again. Now, there's a lot of different kind of clocks. Have you ever seen different kind of clocks before? Well, like this one here, we have one like this. This is what's called an alarm clock. See that? Now this particular one doesn't work anymore, but if it did, when you would wind it up on the back, you would set it for the time that you wanted to wake up, and this right here would move back and forth hitting these bells, and that would be your alarm to wake up. Isn't that neat? Now you also have other kind of clocks or things that are called watches. Have you ever seen a watch before? Well, you can have different kind of watches, like this one here. This is one that's called a wristwatch. It does the same thing. All the numbers around it, hands that point to each one telling you what time it is. And you just wear it on your wrist. Now we also have this one right here. This is one of my favorites. You see this? See, this is what's called a pocket watch. It has a chain here. It hooks on your belt, and then the watch will slide into your pocket. Chain will hang down so you can reach in, grab it out of your pocket with the chain, and then look at this. You press the button on the top and it opens up. You see the same thing inside. Hands, numbers, they tell you what time it is. So there are many, many different kinds of clocks and watches. And even if you look at this one right here beside me, it looks a lot different than what we've just looked at here. You see this? See, this one here is what's called a digital clock. So this one just shows you the time on the front. It is currently 7:46. Now, since you can see what time it is on this particular clock, how do you know what the time is on these other clocks that we've looked at and the watches? Do you know? Well, I kind of gave you a hint earlier. So if you want, why don't we look at that a little bit and see how you can tell time? You want to do that? All right. Let's take a look at this right here. I have this dry erase board. Now on this board, I've drawn a clock. You can see around the clock, we have each of the numbers that we were just talking about. Now, when we look at the clock, we see 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Now, when we're telling time, these are the hours, because we have 12 o'clock here, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, all the way around to 11 o'clock. Now, that's the hours. Now, each one of these can tell you the minutes as well. If you want to know how to tell the minutes, there's a special trick. So around the clock, 12 is 60. 1 is 5. 2 is 10. 3 is 15. 4 is 20. 5, 25. 6, 30. 7, 35. 8 is 40. 9, 45. 10, 50. 11 is 55. So what we did there is, as we went around the clock, see that? We went up by 5 each time. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. So when we're telling time, if the small hand, let's say the small hand points to 1. That means it's 1 o'clock. Now let's say the big hand is pointing down there. Now if you follow the big hand where it's pointing to the 4. So it is 1:20. Isn't that interesting? So see, it's pretty easy to tell time, but there is a little trick as well. When you're telling time, if it's not pointing to a particular number, and say it's in between the numbers, what do you do then? Do you know? Well, let's look at it. So let's say the big hand is not pointing at the 4. Instead, let's say that the big hand is pointing in between the 6 and the 7. So what are you going to do there? Well, it's pretty simple. So in between here, we go from 30 to 35. So between 30 to 35, we have 31, 32, 33, 34. So if it's pointing right between here, we could say it is 1:33. It's pointing to the third number line there. You see that? And same all the way around. You have 4 notches between each one. There you go. So no matter where the big hand is pointing, let's say the big hand is pointing up here. So again, if we follow the rule, 10 is 50, 11 is 55. So if we follow it right between here, it looks like it's pointing to 1:52. See? That's pretty easy. And this way, when you're trying to tell time, you can look at any clock, any watch, follow this pattern that we just talked about, and you'll be able to tell time. Now, another thing that's interesting about time is that time goes way, way back. And what I mean by that is God invented time. Did you know that? He did. As a matter of fact, if we go back in our Bibles and we look at Genesis chapter 1. It's chiming for us. You know what that means? It means it's 8 o'clock. But now getting back to what we were talking about. If we go back to the book of Genesis and we look in the very beginning, chapter 1, it says, "In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, Let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So this here tells us that God invented time. It says, if you look in verse 5, God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So God invented time. And something else that's interesting, if we look at, is over in the New Testament. If you turn to Ephesians chapter 5, and let's look down at verse 15. It says, see then that ye walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Wherefore ye be not unwise, but understanding what the will of the Lord is. So there, this is talking about us as Christians. It says that we are to be redeeming the time, for the days are evil. Now what it means by this is, as children of God, we need to be careful with our time. We need to use it properly. Now there are many different ways that you can do this. You can be doing good things, not filling your time with evil things or listening to things that you shouldn't, talking about things you shouldn't. Fill your time with good things and live your life for God. That's what's most important. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed this time today. I'm glad that we got to look at these clocks and watches. We even had a little lesson about learning how to tell time. I'm glad that I got to share this time with you. I look forward to the next time that we get to spend together. And until then, I love you, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.